Okay guys, today we're going to talk a little bit about subtracting polynomials. But before we do, I want to remind you of a piece that we used to do when we multiply. So if I have something that is negative out in front, and then I have a set of parentheses, normally anything that's out here, I would distribute to each one of these. But also remember, when there's a negative out here and there's no number, I have to assume that there's a 1 there. Then my job is going to be to take this and distribute it to each number. So remember, distributing talks about multiplying. So in this one, if I do negative 1 times positive 4x squared, it's going to be negative 4x squared. Negative 1 times positive 5x is going to be negative 5x. And negative 1 times negative 7 is going to be positive 7. So when we go to subtracting, we're going to use this concept, but I guess there's one piece I want you to recognize as well. Basically what happens when you multiply by negative 1 is as these go down, you're basically flipping the signs. So if it was positive, it becomes negative. If it's negative, it's going to become positive. So this is something we've talked about before, but we're going to actually use this when we go through to do subtracting. Okay, so directions for subtracting. Besides this first step right here, the steps are exactly the same as adding. So when we subtract polynomials, we're going to distribute the subtraction to all the numbers after it. So when you're talking about the numbers after it, they're the things that are in the parentheses after the subtraction sign. Now, we're going to continue to make columns in standard form. That's just like adding. We're going to sort our terms in the appropriate columns, just like adding. And we're going to total columns, just like you did when you add. So let me give you an example of this first one. So you can see, obviously, right here I have a subtraction. And in many ways, we can pretend like that 1 is on the outside. So before I do anything, there's also one piece that I want you to recognize. And that is, you can add that 1 in front of the or after the subtraction side, that's fine. But I'm also going to add a 1 in front of this variable right here that doesn't have a number. Because remember, we talked about before, we assume there's a 1 whether we write it or not. Okay, now, this subtraction is going to get distributed to both of these. Now, when I distribute, the good news is we just talked about it basically changes the sign. So if this happens to be positive 1x, it's going to become negative 1x. If this is plus 7, it's going to become minus 7. Now, there's the good news for us. The good news is that we can use that pattern and distribute even more a little quickly if we want to. Now, when we go to putting things together now, we have to put this together and the piece where we took our subtraction and distributed it. So between both of these, the highest exponent I see is just an exponent of 1 with x and my numbers. Okay, now I'm going to start to put those in the columns they belong in. So 5x and minus 5 and negative 1x and negative 7. So if I were to total this now, I would end up in this column, positive 5 and negative 1 would be positive 4. And negative 5 and negative 7 is going to be negative 12. So the big thing for us that's going to be different is distributing this. But then it's going to be like adding, except I have to do this parenthesis and the new numbers that I came up with when I distributed. Okay, let's try another one. So on this next one, I have to distribute to each one of these. Remember, we talked about basically all it does is change the sign. So negative 5x squared becomes positive 5x squared. Minus 2x becomes adding 2x. Minus 9 becomes plus 9. Okay, once it's distributed, these are the two that I'm going to have to put together now. Now I can add up the pieces I have left over. Out of both of those, the highest exponent I see is 2. So for my standard form, I have x squared, x in my number. And now we can go through and start to get things sorted where they belong. So 2x squared plus 3x plus 2, 5x squared plus 2x plus 9. And now we're going to go through and just total them. So if I do my plus sign here and draw my line. So now I'm going to start to total. So in this column, I have positive 7x squared. In this column, I'm going to have positive 5x. And in this column, I'm going to have positive 11. Okay, let's try another one. So here's one that's even a little bit longer. But when we start, it starts the same way. Anything that is after the subtraction sign, I'm going to have to distribute my subtraction to. So remember, it changes signs. So this becomes negative 5x squared. This becomes plus 4x. And this becomes minus 6. Now to make my columns, I have to look at this and this. So that means I have the highest exponent I have is 3. So x to the third, x squared, x, and my number. And then I'm going to start to take it and sort my pieces. So we're going to sort these 4 pieces first. I am going to add a 1 there. So if I start to go through and sort now, it's going to be 2x to the third plus 8x squared plus 1x plus 10. And then we're going to go down to this part right here. So negative 5x squared plus 4x, and then your negative 6. Then I can make my plus sign and draw my line. So now I'm just going through and starting to total each of my columns. So this one's kind of easy because it only has that 2x to the third that's there. If I go here, positive 8 and negative 5 is going to be positive 3, so positive 3x squared. On this one, 1x and 4x, both being positive, is going to be 5x. And then 10 plus negative 6 is going to be positive 4. Okay, we're going to start some beginning ones today, and those will be the first of them. Let me know if you have questions.